Hi YouTube and welcome to another video. Today we're doing a little tutorial for Mina Ashido's horns. Again, Mina Ashido is a character from My Hero Academia / Boku no Hero Academia, which is an anime and a manga. And basically she looks like this. As you can see, she has these little yellow horns that, because she's like an alien or whatnot, we don't really know. But yeah, I have this current wig that I've used. It's kind of messy right now, but don't mind that. And these are the horns that I made for her. They're a bit more rounded than I think I'm going to make in this tutorial. In this tutorial I think I'm going to make them a bit more angular / hard edged, just because that's a bit more in tune with what it looks like in her character design. But yeah, without any further ado, let's get on to the tutorial. Okay, so I'm back at my desk and I figured I'd make a little material list before we get on with the tutorial. So first you're going to need some Crayola Model Magic. And I think it's either 1 or 2 packs of these. I'll get to that later in the video because I have 2 packs. One of them's a little bit unopened, but I'll start with this one just in case I want to actually measure how much Model Magic you need. I think you can probably get away with 1 if you make smaller horns. It depends on how big you want to make them, but I usually have them around like this size. I don't know. And yeah, next item you'll need is some Mod Podge. And I usually use the glossy kind because I like there to be a glossy finish on my horns because, I don't know, that's my style / aesthetic, and that's how I like to cosplay her. And then you'll also need a brush to apply the Mod Podge. Sometimes I apply it with my hands, honestly, because it can be easier that way, but you're going to need a brush for the acrylic paint, which is the next item. I would suggest getting a small tube of yellow and a small tube of white. You don't need that much unless you are going to paint in the future. I use acrylic paint and I usually use either Basics or Winsor & Newton because I'm an art student. And yeah. Okay, so we're going to start out with this bag of Model Magic because it is the one that is unopened and I want to measure how much we have to use. I'm pretty sure it's 1 bag. Again, I'm not sure. So I'm just going to use some scissors to open it up because I am not that skilled in opening bags. So as you can see, I got the white kind. You can probably get a colored kind, but white is the easiest to work with because it's easy to paint colors on top of white. You could probably get some yellow if you want to just do yellow, straight up yellow horns. So if you want to smooth out certain parts of it, you can always use a little bit of water to wet it up a little bit so that it maintains the integrity of the sculpt. So yeah. First thing I do, since I'm going to try and see how much Model Magic I need, I'm probably going to need a little more than a bag, but I'm going to split it in half, or at least split it into 2 even-sized balls. And yeah, so I'm going to set one of those aside for now. I keep thinking there's stuff on my desk, but there's really not. And you're just going to roll it into a ball. It's also good when you're making these horns to have like a flat notebook or a sketchbook that you can like use to help make the angles of the horns, because her horns are very geometric and angular. So yeah, and yeah, just rolling this into a ball. It helps smooth out these like little imperfections that you get, and it also just makes the form very less prone to cracking rather when it dries. Okay, so now that this one's in some weird sort of ball form, I'm going to move on to the second one and make it into a ball as well. Let's see how size they are. They're pretty much the same size, so that should be... Oh, I just did that. You can always roll them back up if you want to reform them, but yeah, it's pretty easy. You can probably get away with redoing the shape a few times, especially if you add a little bit of water to your hands or to the clay. I don't know if it's considered clay, but I'm pretty sure something like that. So next, once you have these 2 balls of Model Magic, you're gonna roll them out together. And it's like rolling a worm like you do in like grade school and whatnot, but you want to taper one side of each of them so that they're even. I'll show you what I mean. You want to like taper them out so they go to a point a little bit. It's pretty much a basic horn shape, but you're gonna tweak it later. I like to roll them out at the same time just so I can make sure they're really even and symmetrical, because you don't want one horn to be like super, like, I don't know, thick at one end and the other one to be like small. So at this point, when they're like these weird little horns, you can kind of measure them against your head in a mirror. I kind of know how long it is on my head, so I don't really have to measure them, I guess, because I've made these horns quite a few times. But yeah, you just want to make sure they're the same like thickness on both ends. This one's obviously thicker and on this end and whatnot, so I'm gonna fix that a little bit. Again, you want to do this against a flat surface so that you get it really smooth, and you can always push it down a little bit if you want to make it thicker in some parts, or if you want to start over with like a shorter horn. Basically, we have these 2 horns. They're very straight at the moment, except the base is at an angle, if you want to see it like that. I don't know how well it shows up on camera because I'm already at a weird angle in this shot. So we have one, and then the other can be perfectly, I just nailed that. It can be perfectly symmetrical, again, because these are sisters right now. These are brothers, whatever twins you want them to be, and they're still straight. Okay, you can always bend or make the base a bit diagonal later after you like shape the horns and want to put them on your head. Okay, so at this point we're going to take the horns and I'm going to get something flat. I'll be right back. So I have this like sketchbook with a cardboard back, but this is pretty much flat if I keep it flat. So at this point I'll put the horns, I'll arrange them on the desk so that they're facing each other so they're symmetrical, and I'll sort of flatten them a little bit. And this part is a process. It's kind of making the horns into like oblong rectangles. You can make them as angular as you want them to be. You don't even really need to use the sketchbook, you just can if you want to. And just make sure they're flat on each side all the way up to the top. You can also do things like that. My desk is a mess right now. See, you have that nice flat edge, and it has a little bit of an edge. And make sure you do that for all 4 sides. So now you have this kind of long pyramid shape. Let me just do that with the other one as well. And now at this point you should have 2 pretty like flat, a little bit angular horn shapes. At this point, we are going to, I'm actually going to use a separate object. I'm going to use this nice cloud thing I have. You basically want something with like a 90-degree angle. This one actually is probably not very good because it has these little embellishments here and there, but it'll be fine. So you can also use like the edge of a table. My desk is very strange, so I can't use it. But you're going to figure out, you kind of like take a third and then a third here, and you just sort of shape it back. So I'm gonna do this a little bit at a time. You kind of flatten it, you can kind of flatten it against this and then make this shape. So it has that nice crease in there. And figure out where it is on this, about a third and a third. And do the same. You kind of want to do it slowly so that it doesn't like crease too much when it bends, because you can get some little cracks there, and you can always smooth it out with like your finger and a little bit of water. But yeah, then again, I'm gonna just flatten it a little bit so it's more angular. It's just a lot of process of shaping it to your liking. Okay, so now we have, if you always want to check on how it looks, you can just kind of put them opposite, facing the opposite direction, and then compare and contrast how they look. So these are pretty symmetrical right now. I'm just going to give them a little bit more flattening so they're a bit more angular. You can again use, that doesn't work, you can use the edge of something like a table. And that bend is probably going to be a little bit smaller eventually. I don't know how to explain things. That bend is going to look like that a little bit. And we're going to make it symmetrical. Remember, you can always, like this part, it's like kind of going back on itself. So I'm gonna just get some water on my finger and then I'm gonna smooth that out a little bit. So I'm just going to smooth that out a little bit. You don't want to use too much water because then it will like just start melting a little bit. But use like a little damp finger. Yeah, smooth those out. Sorry I'm not talking over a lot of this. It's mostly just eyeing it and like perhaps looking at a reference as well on how they look. And just molding it a lot. I'm gonna try to do it at the same time as the other one so they look symmetrical. Honestly, probably made this longish, thickish section at the bottom a bit too long, so I would say go maybe a quarter down when it's still straight out. can always kind of shape it into a different shape. It's so moldable because it's air dry. Okay, once you've reached a shape you're like happy with, this is what mine looks like right now. Just give it a once over, I suppose. Make sure one of the, make sure when you look at the horn, make sure you know which side it's going to be. Like, I know I'm probably going to use it like this, so I'm going to kind of move this part, the small part of the horn, a little bit facing outwards so it's more recognizable and visible when you put it on your head around this angle or so. So that's approximately what they're going to look like. I'm going to, of course, sand down part of, like, I'm going to sand them down a little bit before I actually paint them. And last thing you do before you let them dry is make sure the bottom part is at an angle so that it's going to rest against your head. Again, pretend this is your head, I guess. It's going to rest like that a little bit. So that's why we have the angle there. And do that for the other side as well. And then we let them dry. So I usually have them dry a little bit on this, like this. But after they harden enough that this part is not going to flop over, I like to put them standing up again or leaning against something. See how it like is starting to cave in? You don't want that. So you're gonna probably want to, sorry, I'm like just putting like a little bit of tweaks on them. You're going to want them to dry on a flat surface for maybe like a few hours. I'll put a little time number here or something. And then after they're dry enough like that, you want to put them standing up so you don't get any cracks on them on the bottom or top. I forget which side it really shows up on. I think it's the bottom because they're not facing the air. And you'll be good. So let that dry for, I think it says like 3 days on the package. Yeah. For best results, completely dries in 72 hours depending on the thickness of the piece. And these are pretty thick, so I would say leave them to dry for like 3 or 4 days. I'll put another little thing that tells you how much I let them dry on the table for, because they should be starting to harden a little bit now that, because I've been leaving them out and playing with them for quite a bit. Okay, so leave that, and a few days later I will come back and finish this tutorial. Okay, so it's a few days later. It's Sunday to be exact. I believe I started these on Tuesday, so then it's been 5 days. This is what they're looking like at the moment. They have a bit of these little bumps and imperfections, so I'm just going to smooth those out with sandpaper and also get rid of any, like, I don't know, like weird textures that are in here. So I'm going to start. I have 3 sandpapers. I have medium, fine, and extra fine. These are like the bendy, like, you can bend them and stuff. They're not super stiff, so you can actually get around like curves and stuff. But I'm going to pretty much stick with like a flat surface. So I'm going to just start sanding them. Okay, so now that they're quite sanded, I noticed that they are trying to crack a little bit in these little sections, and there's a little part that there's like a little indent that I want to smooth out, and just ensure that there's no cracking in these little like edges and in between these creases. So I'm actually going to go in with some vinyl spackling. Yeah, you can, I got this at like one of my school stores, but you can probably get it online and whatnot. And since I don't have an actual like palette knife or whatever with me, I'm just going to use a folded up piece of paper to help spread it. This is actually marker paper, but I got it in a sample pack, so it's really small. And you're just gonna do like a little thin layer of spackling just to fill in those little cracks. Okay, so we're gonna let that sit for, what does it say, 3 to 6 hours. So I'm gonna say 6 hours just to be completely sure. And I'm just going to come back after that and finish up these horns. Okay, so it's 6 hours later. It's time to sand them again. So this time I'm gonna go in with the fine sander actually and just smooth it out yet again. Okay, so for paints personally I have these Winsor & Newton colors, acrylic paint colors, but honestly any acrylic paint is probably fine. I don't really have palette paper, so I'm just going to use some marker paper, and I'm going to just mix the colors into a light yellow. So you're going to add like mostly white first and slowly add some yellow in until you get your desired color. Remember, it's going to dry a tiny bit darker than what you're putting down on, because when it dries it gets a little bit darker, only a tiny bit. Okay, so it's about half an hour later and the horns are dry. And I'm just gonna add some Mod Podge. Mod Podge is great as a sealer, and it's great as like a glue-in finish. So that's what we're gonna use to keep the paint sealed, as well as give it a nice glossy finish. I like to use my hands when I use Mod Podge just because if you use a brush, sometimes the hairs get caught in it and it turns very dirty, which has happened to me on numerous occasions, so at this point I just like to use my hands. And let that dry for about 15 to 20 minutes. And now we're going to do a second layer of Mod Podge 20 minutes later, since it's better to have a couple layers than just one. Besides the fact that my wig looks like a mess, this is what the horns ended up looking like. And yeah, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and comment down below and subscribe for other content. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I hope to see y'all next time. Bye!